Again, I would refer you to Director Comey for any further explanation as to the basis for his recommendations. The recommendation that I received from the team, including Director Comey, was that the investigation be resolved without charges. As I've indicated, I received a briefing from the team, which included not just the prosecutors but the agents and Director Comey. Their unanimous recommendation was that the matter be resolved in the way in which we've announced, and I accepted that recommendation. Well, Congressman, I think the statutes that were considered here speak for themselves. To answer further would require a discussion of the facts and the analysis of this matter, which, as I've indicated, I'm not in a position to provide at this time. Again, I'd refer you to Director Comey's discussion for that. As I've indicated, the team reviewed this matter, and it was a unanimous team decision. I made the decision some time ago that I would accept the recommendation of that team and was awaiting that recommendation. When I received it, there was no basis not to accept it, and again, I reiterate my pride and faith in them. Thank you, Congressman, for the question. Let me be clear that my decision was to accept the recommendation of the team of agents and investigators who worked on this, and these are the career attorneys as well as the dedicated investigators, including the FBI director, who worked on this matter for over a year. They've reviewed the facts, they've followed the facts, they looked at the law, they've applied the facts to that law, and came up with a unanimous recommendation, a joint recommendation, in effect, that was provided to me. Congressman, every case stands on its own separate facts and the application of those facts to the law. So you'd have to refer to the specific facts of the other matters that you're referring to. With respect to the investigation into the former Secretary's handling of classified information, her private email system, again, I can tell you and this entire committee and the American people that all of the relevant facts were considered, investigated thoroughly, and reviewed by the entire team, which again is composed of career independent investigators as well as lawyers, and their recommendation upon a full and thorough analysis was that the matter be resolved in the way in which it was recommended to me. As I've indicated, I determined to accept that recommendation and did in fact accept that recommendation. Congressman, with respect to the Director's statements, as I've indicated, he's provided really unprecedented access into his views of the matter, and I would refer you to them. I understand the issue that you raise obviously is one involving perceptions as to whether or not charges would have been brought in some other situation. And again, I can only refer you back to the Director's statements where he chose to outline the fact that no other cases similar to this had in fact been brought. Well, Congressman, again, I'm not going to further explain the Director's comments as he has, I believe, explained them. What I will say, when people have asked, and I believe, and I understand your question to be the meaning of gross negligence, one always, as you know, refer to the statute itself, relevant cases, and then, of course, it is a very fact-specific inquiry. And since to go further would go into the facts of this case, I'm not able to go further at this time. Okay. But we always start with the statute. We start with relevant case law. We start with legislative history into the determination of what Congress meant. I try and be responsive to the committee's questions, and I appreciate the information that staffers provide about what's of interest to the committee so that we can have the information for you. I believe her statements are on the record, and I defer you to that. Congressman, I can't speak to any cases you may be referring to involving friends or colleagues. Again, I would refer you to the description that
I appreciate
provided
that,
about
Madam General, but I've got to ask you a question.
That follow this similar fact pattern. That is what I think we focus on.
Okay, let me go through.
Every case is different.
Every case
has to be handled in the same way. Every individual, whether they are former secretary,
so there will be some cases
has to be reviewed.
Madam General, I have very limited
time
time
and the law there. Well, again, with respect to the team, typically we don't go into the composition of it. It was led by our National Security Division, and everyone on the team was a career individual. The investigative team was composed of career prosecutors and seasoned agents. Congressman, I've replied to you as to the composition of the team that all of them.
So your answer is no. There were no political appointees.
All of them were career lawyers as well as seasoned investigators. Congressman, you may take the appropriate steps in terms of reviewing anything, and you may make requests for that, and we'll work to accommodate you with respect to that. I don't have an answer for you beyond that.
So you couldn't today, you could not.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With respect to the handling of any of the documents or emails in this matter, Because they involve another agency, we would have to work with the other agency. We always work with the agency that is termed the owner of information. So on behalf of the Department of Justice, I would not be able to give you an answer at this time as to those documents because it would involve other agencies. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to that, Congressman. I think it's important to note that the Director and I had very different roles in this investigation and therefore very different amounts of information about this investigation. I am speaking about the information that I received, which again, as I've noted, was the team recommendation. Director Comey was speaking from his position as someone who was more directly involved in the investigation. Well, as I've indicated, it would not be appropriate in my role to discuss the specific facts and the law. We typically actually do not provide the level of detail that Director Comey did. He chose to provide that level of information and detail. Well, as indicated, we obviously are not allowed to discuss certain types of information, for example, grand jury information, in any matter. Congressman, as I've indicated, the Director and I had very different roles in this investigation. So his level of detail is significantly different from mine, and I would not be able to provide you with that same level of detail. In addition to that, in part of my role as Attorney General, I would not be going into these discussions typically. We have taken the step of providing more information on this matter than in others. It would depend upon the nature of the information. Certainly there would be. Well, with respect to the source of that information, if it came from the grand jury, that would be a legal prohibition. With respect to opinions about the matter of law, that's a different issue. Certainly, I believe that the prosecutors who worked on that matter investigated it, presented it to a grand jury, and received an indictment. We, of course, have, as presented in our papers before the Supreme Court, have made a different argument. Congressman, I don't have a comment on the McDonald case except to refer you to the pleadings in that for a discussion of the law there. Can you compare the federal nexus
between the two cases for us, please?
Congressman, I don't have a comparison between those two cases for you. Well, Congressman, with respect to the usual process, it is in fact the way in which most cases are handled that the team of career investigators or prosecutors make a recommendation and go forward with an action. No, sir. I had no discussions with the Director on that point, nor had I made any. That is correct. Okay. And what I would say, though, is that, as I indicated before, the process that we followed in this case was, in fact, a very common process. I chose to make it more public because I wanted to make it clear that there was no inappropriate influence on the investigation. I actually don't recall Director Comey speaking on that point. I'd have to go back and check, so I don't have a comment on that. Again, I don't recall him speaking directly to that act, but again, he could have. I just don't recall him speaking directly to that. At this point, again, I think that with respect to what was reviewed in the investigation about the handling of the emails, we heard the basis of his recommendation, and in fact, the team came to a similar conclusion. I don't know if that was under the purview of the investigation. It's not something. I don't know if that was under the purview of the investigation at this point. And as I said before, I don't recall a specific opinion on that. Okay.